An example I love to use for, especially when we were used to be the in-seat classes, or when I still am in-seat, I love to talk about it as when you talk about that the street coming into the school is 35 miles per hour. And that's an example that everyone's used to, right? When you're driving in, unless you're late for a class and you're flying at 70 miles. No, I'm just kidding. Always go at or below the speed limit. But if I wanted to convert this 35 miles per hour, remember, we talked about that the first day. This is saying the same thing as 35 miles in 1 hour, or the same thing as saying in 1 hour, I traveled 35 miles. Turning this into a ratio is what's more useful for us. But say if I start with this, something that we're really familiar with, what miles per hour, right? We use it many times every day. What if I want to convert this to how many feet per second am I traveling? Because again, that's something that when you talk about, that's something that you can look at more easily. If I were to ask you miles per hour, to look at the length of a mile isn't very easy, but look at, you can hold your feet. You can look at your shoe and say, that's feet, and second is on a clock. Feet per second can sometimes be an easier conversion. That's why in a physics class, in a chemistry class, I often hear this called train tracks, is what it's commonly called in a lot of high schools and everything. But what I want to do is use those unit conversions. If I start with miles and I want to get rid of them, I want to think of, well, how many miles per feet? Come from Colorado, I'm really used to this, 5,280 feet in 1 mile. And again, I like that because again, I'm from Colorado, the Mile High City, right? Memorizing that number isn't as important as I can look this up in a book, I can look this up on Google. But what's more important is I want to say 5,280 feet is 1 mile, or 1 mile is 5,280 feet. But as I'm trying to convert this, if I have the miles in the numerator, what I'm looking for is the miles in the denominator. This says the same thing. Both those fractions, both of those ratios are saying the same thing of how many feet are in a mile. But this one is not useful for me because I don't want miles in the same area. I want the miles to cancel. So I'm going to multiply this times 5,280 feet over 1 mile. I'm setting this up to where the miles cancel. Now I have feet per hour. Well, again, if I want my final answer to end up being feet per second, then I need to find a way to convert that hours to seconds. Now, we are able to sometimes go and convert those right away if you're familiar with those. But again, think easy, because I would first say, well, in 1 hour is 60 minutes. I'm going to go to minutes first because that's one that a lot of us commonly know right off the top of our head, especially time. That's saying 1 hour is 60 minutes, or there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. Both of those are correct, but only one of them is going to be useful for us. If I have the hours in the denominator this time, notice I don't want them in the denominator. Again, it's not because whichever one I wrote first. I just randomly wrote one first because of whatever came first. I put on the top like we write fractions. Coincidental. I'm using this as 1 hour over 60 minutes is because my entire intent is I want those hours to cancel. If I'd selected this one, they would not be canceling. So I'm going to have 60 minutes is that same ratio. And what I now have is feet per minute. You see this direction where it's headed. I still have minutes. I need it to be seconds. Well, using what we commonly know as knowledge is 1 minute is 60 seconds, or 60 seconds is 1 minute, right? We can look that up on Google. We can look that up in our textbook as tables. Memorizing these numbers isn't as important as being able to write that as a ratio. 1 minute is 60 seconds, or 60 seconds is 1 minute. And I want to look at when I convert this. Well, I have the minutes in the bottom. I'm going to select this again to be with where I have the minutes in the top because I want that to cancel. And you notice the direction this is headed. While this is a correct ratio, it's not helpful for me because it doesn't cancel out my minute. Notice I have not changed anything. By multiplying by all these conversions, all of these are the same thing. 5,250 feet is 1 mile. 60 minutes is 1 hour. 60 seconds is 1 minute. I'm not changing anything. It's like my fraction reducing. But what I have is all of my units across the board are canceling out to where all I have left is feet over seconds. I have fractions. As we said on the first set of videos, multiplying fractions is easy. Top times bottom. I'm going to write this out as 35 times 5,280 times 1, right? The times 1 we know, we don't even have to write those, but times 1 times 60 times 60. Punch into a calculator, right? Do this all by a calculator. 35 times 5,280 is 184,800, right? We don't care about these numbers. We're letting the calculator do all the difficult work for us. 60 times 60 is 3,600. Times 1 is 3,600. Well, what I want to do is look at that 184 over 800 divided by 3,600. And that's what's going to be my 35 miles per hour. .3 feet per second. And that's something that's a little bit, and round it however you're supposed to. Again, you can punch this into a calculator and check my work, whatever you want to do. It's 0.33333 forever. Maybe they say round it to the nearest foot, round it to the nearest tenth, to the nearest hundredth. Read whatever the directions say, right? Those black directions at the end of every problem that no one ever reads. That's how our rounding is. We'll talk about rounding later, but what this is saying, this is something that's easier to say, is when I say I'm traveling 35 miles per hour, we're used to looking at our speedometer on a car, but what that's saying is we're actually traveling 50 feet. Think about that 50 feet. The entire, that's double the length of this room in 1 second. That's the unit conversion that helps us understand how fast 35 miles per hour really is 51 feet in 1 second. Tick, I've already gone 50 feet. That's how we use unit conversion. That's why, again, you'll hear this called train tracks, because it looks like we're canceling those, or it's just the idea of canceling out those units.